Welcome to the Scott Home Podcast. Back here, we are fully in the month of May. The birds are chirping. We have a surprisingly large amount of stuff to talk about. I think I jinxed us, Dustin, behind the curtain here about, let's say, 4 or 5 days ago. I honestly pointed out to you guys, I was like, what are we going to talk about this week? Like, what is going on? Like, I know we have like sports in season, and that was admittedly me also forgetting about women's golf regionals, which I wouldn't have not recorded an episode with a Cougar team in the NCAA postseason. But I think in these several days since the Cougar news cycle has given us plenty of spring and also off-season fall and winter stuff to talk about. So just you and I, the OG co-hosts tonight. How you doing, friend?
Doing well, man. Doing well. Excited, ready for the summer to come up here, but hanging on to some Cougar sports. And one, I think our lead topic is gonna be a little bit of a bummer, but I think some exciting off-season stuff to talk about as well. So a little bit of everything to be chatting with you about on a beautiful Wednesday evening.
And Dustin, I'll tell you who else has a little bit of everything for you in the summer. Who do you think that is?
Is it our friends at Charlie Hustle?
It is sure our friends at Charlie Hustle. You can go and check them out on the World Wide Web at charliehustle.com. Vintage made fresh, as our friends in Kansas City like to say. As I always say, makers are incredibly comfortable. Vintage collegiate wearables, including a great Houston Cougar collection. Even though we are not in the crew neck and hoodie season, I'm obligated to note that they have a fantastic selection of crew necks and hoodies. If you are like Dustin and I, near lifelong residents of warm weather places, you might do your crew neck and hoodie shopping during, I guess, the crew neck and hoodie off season, as it were, here in the hotter months of the calendar year. And Charlie Hustle is a fantastic Houston Cougar collection there. Use our promo code PAW15, PAW15. That's going to save you 15% on that order. Incredible t-shirt selection as well. Maybe a little more seasonally appropriate there. Vintage Cougar designs you're going to find nowhere else. And of course, designs from people that support us at the Scott Holland podcast. I think I saved the most important aspect there for last, but probably the most important aspect is that you're going to look fantastic wearing the designs from Charlie Hustle. And of course, do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/SHPAWDcast if you want to put a few American dollars behind what Dustin, Bobby, absent though he may be, and myself do on a weekly basis talking about the Cougs. That's patreon.com/SH podcast. Support our network partners, the 10-12 network as well, talking all things Big 12 over there. Dustin, I think that's everything. Gotta, of course, lead off with the Cougar sport that is currently, or I guess just recently finished their NCAA postseason appearance as the Cougar women's golf program. And I think I'm going to start with kind of my most overarching thought, Dustin, to kind of briefly skip to the end here. It is painful to come that close to what would be a historic season for this program. It is painful to get that close, but I have to remind myself, and we're probably going to talk about at least a couple of these sports, that there are many U of H sports right now, or at least several U of H sports right now. Many might be a little bit overstating it, where what I would give right now for that program to be, like they were almost close to advancing in NCAA championships. Like there are programs right now where it's just like, man, I cannot fathom what this program would have to go through to even get to that point. So frustrating though it may be that the Cougar women's golf program did come up just barely short of a historic season as a team, I think it's still incredible that the youngest intercollegiate program U of H has had is still consistently this good and is still this close to greatness. So let's talk about the last few days in Auburn, Dustin.
Yeah, like you said, unfortunately, you got to kind of jump to the end, which is that Cougar women's golf by one stroke missed. I guess it would have been one stroke where there would have been in a three-way tie for 2 spots, which would have been resolved via some on the course tiebreaker that unfortunately we did not get to figure out what that was. So yeah, as you refresher, the top 5 teams in each regional advanced to nationals. Nationals being somewhere that U of H has never been, despite a nearly every year regional, despite being a nearly every year regional participant since the program's inception. Was there now their 8th appearance, I believe 9 or 10 years that they were eligible. And after I think the thing that makes it just so hard to take is that after 2 rounds, the Cougars were in second place at 15 over par. But, even I think after 2 rounds, you knew there wasn't a lot of margin for error because, the 2 teams that were tied for that last spot, the 5th tie for the 5th spot after 2 rounds, were just 5 strokes behind the Cougars. So not a lot of room, even with that second place position that they were in. And unfortunately, with basically no margin for error, Houston erred. They shot 301 as a team, their worst round of the tournament, when all of the other top teams, aside from host Auburn, who had a huge lead and didn't have to worry about qualifying, everybody else was having their best or their close to their best round in the third round. And that caused Houston to drop all the way from second place to a tie for sixth. Like I said, literally one stroke shy of South Carolina and Tulsa. Just any one stroke over the course of the tournament, just the heartbreaker, knowing that it would have gotten you into at least a tiebreaker where you could have had a 2/3 chance of making it to nationals. And I think it's even more painful when you add the additional layer of it coming on the heels of the Big 12 tournament and how eerily reminiscent this was to how things went in the Big 12 tournament for the Cougars. They were in the Big 12 tournament, second place after 2 rounds, but a ways behind number one and not a ton of distance between them and the teams kind of right behind them. And they had a bad third round and dropped to sixth. Literally, it's a description that fits both of Houston's final 2 events of the year. Their 2 biggest events of the year, obviously. So really tough, really heartbreaking. But kind of like you said, I think when you look at the program as a whole, when you look at the year as a whole, it's the classic, progress versus results thing. The results are pretty rough. You really would have loved to finish better than 6th in the Big 12 championships. You really would have loved to finish, in that top 5 that you could have advanced to nationals once you got to regionals there. But like you said, I mean, just a really fantastic year overall with a really, really young team. Aside from Nicole Abelar, senior, who I don't think has a COVID year left, and I think is out of eligibility. But everybody else on your roster has eligibility left. Hyunji Kang was the only other golfer from your tournament 5 who was even a junior. Everybody else underclassmen. And then your most often used, lowest scoring average non-tournament 5 golfer was Ellen Yates, a freshman. And that's not even including Natalie St. Germain, who came in as a sub at nationals in the second round, I think. It was only her 4th tournament of the year for reasons that I'm not sure. I don't know if she was maybe battling injuries or something like that, but she was only a sophomore this year. So, I mean, I think this is an offseason. We're going into the offseason. The question is, can Lydia Gumm hold on to all or most of these golfers? Because I think this could be really an offseason where that's all the recruiting she really needs to do, is just getting the golfers from your roster back for next year. I think if you keep this core intact, I'm always a believer in going into the offseason with a bad taste in your mouth that makes you want to be, even more motivated to come back the next year and come back even stronger. So obviously, yeah, it's hard to stomach how the last 2 events of the year, the biggest 2 events of the year, went this year. But looking at how many talented young golfers are on this roster and the future prospects for this program, it's you still got to be excited and happy with where this program is at.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to take for granted that the Cougs were in the fight here, that you weren't down there kind of below where the Cougs were in that group with other teams from the Cougars Regional, Michigan, Miami, Kennesaw State, teams that were all like at least 20 or 30 strokes off the cut line and really not playing for anything other than pride and I guess a day out at the golf course in Auburn. And yeah, you had that 3-way tie between UH, Tulsa, and Georgia, all at 28 over par as each team's golfers finished up. And UH was in that precarious position because they were the team out of that trio that had the worst round. South Carolina, who had a later tee time. And I remember earlier today, Dustin did a lot of refreshing of the Auburn Regional Golf Stat mobile page on my phone today, just hoping and praying that South Carolina's top golfer, because naturally South Carolina's last golfer in the course was their top golfer, who I think finished in the individual top 5, that she would have a bad final 2 or 3 holes. I looked, I was like, she's on hole number 18. Like, I need her to double bogey here for U of H's team season to remain alive. Though, like you said, the South Carolina unfortunately finished 1 stroke ahead of the Cougars. Real thrill of victory, agony of defeat moment. And I try to keep reminding myself that, kind of like you talked about, this team's best golfers are fairly young in the college game, that there are several different sports in the athletic department, like I said in the intro, where I would kill for U of H to be at this kind of rough point in their sport, that this is a consistent postseason team with youth and room for future growth. I think we can put that to the side and say I'm very grateful for that. And also, God, just the way these last 2 events went this year, just almost could not be scripted to be more painful. I guess you could have lost it from a leading position. You could always probably find a worser case scenario if you really tried, but yeah, really rough way to go out in your two postseason events, which doesn't, I think, change our overall outlook. But yeah, rough to think about those final rounds of those two events and think of the ways that this could be a young team with a bright future. And if you even just have an average, like not even like a great round, if you just have like an average team round in both those events, it could be a very different season. And I haven't seen anything confirmed about this, Dustin, but I think most Vidinskild should be playing in the championship. Wasn't she one of the top two individual finishers on a I usually, full disclosure, usually rely on Ryan at Go Cougs, who is more of a golfer / golf follower / also our currently not with us co-host Bobby to fact check me on these golf things. I believe I really looked up and down the individual leaderboard. I know Minnesota didn't go as a team, but they had an individual who finished actually ahead of Moa. So obviously the Cougars team season is over. Definitely not vamping while Dustin looks at another monitor at the leaderboard here to try to fact check me on this one. But haven't seen anything official from U of H yet. I think we'll just say at this point, think the Cougars top finisher Moa Vidinskild could herself be heading to the
yeah, unfortunately, I've got some bad news, which is I feared that I was correct about this, but yeah, it is the top 5 teams in the top single individual. So
so it's no longer top 2 individual finishers.
Correct. It is just the top.
So that would be yeah. So I guess that means, despite having I think a great individual round, she finished tied for 5th, if memory serves, among all competitors. But yeah, Minnesota's Isabella McCauley, I guess, will be the lone non-team individual going. So that's it for the Cougar season, I guess.
Yeah, it's rough to just kind of like not only that to have a disappointing third round and not finish where you wanted to, but just to have that be the end of the season is pretty rough. And I think it's kind of one of those things where it can go two ways. It can be that hey, that was really the motivation we needed to really attack the off season and make sure that we were able to wash that taste out of our mouth the next time around. Or that can be the kind of thing that gets in your head, and so you just hope for a team that this young and talented that doesn't become a something for them that really becomes a stumbling block going forward. And maybe that is a way in which having the off season is good, that it gives you some time away from from golf, and get to take some time and maybe clear your head a little bit, and then hopefully come back motivated, like we said, for next year. And hopefully, just like I said, Lydia Gumm will be able to keep this core together, because the number of just really, really talented freshmen and sophomore golfers on this year's team that prove themselves, very capable of going up with some of the top teams in the country, I think gives Houston a great shot next time around at finally getting over that hill, finally getting to that first, team national championship appearance.
No doubt. Real quick golf note, by the way, the men's golf team will be competing starting next Monday at the Baton Rouge Regional. So just a reminder while we're on the topic of postseason golf.
Speaking of postseason, we've got track and field coming up this weekend. Are going to be competing at the Big 12 postseason, not the NCAA postseason, but Big 12 championships. And as a reminder, at Big 12 indoors, we saw the Cougar men take 6th. The women took 11th. Houston has, I think, most years been stronger in the outdoor season, given the event makeup. Most notably, the indoor season does not have a sprint relay, whereas the outdoor season does have a 4x1 relay. That's one of the components that's made Houston traditionally better in the outdoor season. This year, Houston's 4x1 really not kind of the power that it often has been in years past. Nonetheless, though, I do think that Houston's roster is better set up to be successful in outdoor season as compared to indoor. So I think that 6th place for the men, 11th place for the women, Sam, I think really should kind of serve as a baseline in terms of what you want to see Houston accomplish. I think finish those spots or better.
Yeah, I think winning the thing on either side, obviously quite difficult. Not really, I would say, probably our pre-event expectations, but I think this is it's about outperforming the other new Big 12 programs and just doing well in the specific events where we know that the Cougs have an athlete or athletes, or where applicable relay, where where this team has stood out previously in the outdoor season, where this team should expect based on their best performances this season to be competing at your best at this time of year, the time of year that you expect to be the best. So I have a little short list, Dustin, if you don't mind, of the athletes I'm going to be looking at from Big 12 championship if I'm not stepping on your toes.
I have a short list as well, so I'll let you go first, and then any ones that you don't mention, I'll chime in with.
Blow your mind with this first one. I don't know if you've heard Sean Maswanyani, pretty good South African sprinter for the Cougar. But no, I mean, obviously Sean in the 100 and 200. I've kind of noticed he hasn't run the 200 as much in this current outdoor season, but I think there's enough history there with Sean that he's going to still be one to watch there. And obviously has the 5th fastest time in the country in the 100. Will definitely be one to watch in the kind of the short sprinting event, if you will. Michaela Mouton, I'm going to not super deep cut here because we're talking about the athlete with the 11th fastest time in the country currently in the 400, but has that really outstanding freshman season continuing from indoor season, her first collegiate outdoor championship. I think that'll be one to watch there. And Kellyanne Beckford and Sydney Towns, I'm kind of grouping them together. Kellyanne Beckford in the women's 800, not just a threat to win this event at Big 12 championships, but I think at the risk of jinxing her, obviously should be on the short list of favorites to win the whole dang thing ultimately at outdoors. Certainly should be at the top or on the podium when it's all said and done. And Sydney Townsend, the 400 hurdles, currently has the 6th fastest time in the country, 2nd fastest among Big 12 women's athletes like Beckford. I think a veteran athlete who can and should be a threat to win this thing, even going beyond Big 12 outdoors. Dustin, who else is on your list? Yeah. I'm a wild guess here. I'm assuming you had those 4 athletes.
I did, yeah. And I'll start with the women. You mentioned three of the 4 legs of the 4x4 relay, and Michaela Mouton, who I think is a real threat at Big 12 at both the 200 and the 400. You mentioned Kellyanne Beckford, who's a major threat in the 400 and the 800. Amon Babineau, the other leg of that 4x4 relay, which I think Houston is a heavy favorite in the 4x4 relay at Big 12. So that should be an event that they win, I think, as well as Sydney Townsend, who in addition to being part of that relay is also, like you said, a big threat in the 400 hurdles as well. She just put up her best time of the season this past week in the 400 hurdles, 56.13 seconds. That's number 6 nationally, number 2 in the Big 12. So I think 4x4 relay, the 400, Mouton in the 200, Beckford in the 800, Townsend in the hurdles. That's kind of your 400 athletes are kind of your lead. And that's kind of has to be, because really looking at best times in the Big 12 this year, if this goes close to, what the best times are, those are about the only athletes that are going to be scoring big points for Houston. The only other athletes on the women's side that look even really close to the top 8 and being able to score points is Miracle Thompson, currently has the 8th best Big 12 time in the 100 hurdles, and Claire Meyer currently has the 9th best Big 12 time in the 10K. That's pretty much it. So unless somebody else comes out of nowhere, you really, if you want to get some team points, you kind of need your 4x4 ladies there to do quite well. And I think they will all do quite well. So I think Houston will have a pretty decent team score, but definitely going to be relying on, I think, fewer athletes than on the men's side, where you see a little bit more spread out. You mentioned Sean in both of the sprinting events, always a big favorite there. But I think we're going to be real interesting to see how Houston does in that 4x1 relay. They're not the favorites. They've had the 4th best time behind Tech, Baylor, and UT Austin among Big 12 schools this season. So, I think it's very possible. I'd be surprised if they overtake Tech and win the thing, but would love to at least see them maybe overtake one of those other Texas schools and end up on the podium. Would be a fantastic accomplishment. In the 110 hurdles, I think that's going to be a big event for Houston. Devion Wilson, 6th nationally, number 2 in the Big 12 with a best time of 13.38. And when I say number 2 in the Big 12, it's only 1/100th of a second behind Antoine Andrews from Tech. And Andrews put up that time back in March, whereas Wilson was just a couple of weeks ago, so maybe a little bit fresher. And then you've got Jamar Marshall Jr. and freshman Jairus Burton, who I think could very well score points for Houston at Big 12 championships in the 110 hurdles as well. So that's going to be a big event. Christian Sampe, the favorite in the pole vault, has over a 5-inch lead on number 2 in the Big 12 this outdoor season in terms of best clearance in the pole vault. So definitely a favorite there. I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, freshman Andrea Mita, who came out of nowhere in the high jump. He has the current 2nd best performance in that event in the Big 12 this year. So would love to see him on the podium. Another freshman that kind of has come out of nowhere, Cordell Wokiji. I'm sure I'm butchering that last name, and I apologize. Worked his way into the top 25 nationally of the shot put, comes in 5th best in the Big 12. Another event where traditionally Houston hasn't done super well, the javelin. You've got junior Isaac Conchola, who has the current 3rd best mark in the Big 12, and then David Ajama in the triple jump, number 3 in the Big 12 as well. So really a number of guys you see on the men's side that I think are are podium capable in terms of Wilson, Maswangani, Sampi, Mita, Conchola and Ajama. All those guys I think have kind of performances thus far this outdoor season that make you feel like they could be podium finishers of the Big 12, which is no small feat. So excited to see both of these teams, and like I said, hopefully do. I think maybe the men, if they have a real strong event, maybe we see a podium finish for the men as a team. The women obviously were 11th. You want to at least get into single digits, maybe in the rankings with hopefully some strong performances there.
Yeah, I think my only other takeaway that wasn't covered by what you said there is just like, I don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the era of this program where UH was just absurdly dominant at like the 100, that we would see a heat sheet at the AAC championship, and it would be like 6 or 7 different U of H sprinters. But I love the depth. I love the variety of different events that you talked about there. That's not just the spring events, that you have so many like young field athlete guys too.
Yeah.
Cordell, freshman, Andrea Mita, a freshman as well. Like that's really exciting. Christian Sampi, not a freshman, but a high level, exciting athlete. So yeah, no,
Sure.
Excited about the number of different events where U of H has a really intriguing athlete on the men's side, and still obviously excited on the women's side with all the various 400 athletes and what they could do, and just how well they've done from indoor season to present.
Absolutely. All right, Sam, I think next up we're talking a little off-season men's basketball. We got some interesting men's basketball news in the last couple of days. CBS Sports reporting that U of H will be one of the teams that is going to be participating in the inaugural this coming season, early season tournament. The Players Era Festival is the name of the event. It's going to be in Vegas, Sam, which you'll be excited about, I'm sure. 3 games. I believe it's Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday of Thanksgiving week. Expected to be an 8-team event this year, expanding to 16 next year going forward. The 8 teams playing this year: Houston, Bama, Notre Dame, Oregon, Rutgers, San Diego State, Texas A&M, and an as of yet unnamed 8th team. Expected to mostly return actually in the next year going forward, bringing in also additional schools like Duke, Gonzaga, Kansas, Michigan, Syracuse, and Virginia. And I think the big reason why this event is newsworthy, and the big reason why you see so many of the absolute blue blood, just upper crust of the sport teams participating and signing up in this event, is that they're going to be doing, it's going to be a situation where all the athletes participating will participate in NIL-related activities off the court while they are in Vegas, for which each team's NIL collective will receive $1 million. It's also reported going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of another $1 million on the line that will go to the collective for the team that wins the event, or teams if they split it into multiple events. So, expected to be on streaming platforms with Netflix, Disney Plus, and Apple TV being thrown out as possibilities. So, I mean, I think it's huge. There's a reason we're talking about this in the off season. You think about what a big deal Houston made this off season with their $1 million NIL push to try to retain all the players on their roster. And guess what? This is not the last offseason that Houston's going to need NIL money to be competitive, and even just holding on to the players that they have. So, there's a reason that I think every coach quoted in the CBS article about this event gave some version of the same, "You would have to be insane to turn this down" kind of quote about the event. So I think really, I think we can maybe get into if we feel a little bit squishy about, venture capital intersecting with college sports and what that means and how long-term viable this thing is. But just on its face, Sam, getting to play, 3 games in Vegas against elite competition, and knowing that you're going to get just an absolute massive boon to your NIL war chest for potentially the next 3 years, because the article was saying most of these teams are, signing 3-year deals. I mean, that seems like a home run for this program, and I think really just kind of establishing and reestablishing and reaffirming Houston's place as an elite program in men's basketball.
My favorite, it was an anonymous quote. My favorite quote from the CBS article was, I think you probably know the one I'm talking about. An anonymous coach just said, "If the check clears, I'll play the game in the bleeping parking lot at Mandalay Bay." Yeah. Like that, like you said, absolute no brainer. And speaking of things you feel squishy about, I think from what I saw, that the hefty financial backing that you referred to, from the payout for the winning team, the payout just for each team participating in the thing, seems to be coming from a United Arab Emirates-backed investment firm. And the UAE being involved here, I guess, presents other larger questions that I am not smart enough or well-versed enough to talk about on this podcast. I could just say, as a Formula One fan, I'm not entirely unfamiliar with Gulf oil money playing a major role in sports. I will say it should, if nothing else, remove the doubt about, okay, like, this event is advertising this money. Is this event good for that money? Like, are we going to participate in this event and then 4 months, 5 months afterwards, after the season's over, to coach's show, or Duarte's getting leaked to him that, oh yeah, U of H never got paid for this. I think, if nothing else, the Emirates being involved in it at least gives the event, financial stability that, that, hey, you're going to participate in this thing that seems like a no-brainer, but you might actually get paid for it when it's all said and done, whether you win or not. And I think, as importantly, the high-level basketball competition, that this year's a good field. The 2025 field sounds like it is absurdly stacked. Like combining the best teams from 2 or 3 different of, kind of the existing structure of MTE. Is that love the Maui Invitational. Hope that the traditional MTEs that I kind of put on my TV in between Turkey that time of year don't completely go away, but the kind of field that event probably could never get, even with the prestige that the kind of existing insert name of big Thanksgiving multi-team event here that you could pull. And really exciting opportunity for U of H. And I'm glad that our school was an early adopter to an event that is going to probably turn into a major NIL boon for the program. And in the broadest sense, I think U of H should be making decisions with the goal of being in the forefront of new things, provided it's not, obvious risk, that the obvious problems aren't screaming at you in the face, whether, hey, where's the money coming from? Things like that I think you and I have at least addressed here. I think being innovative, being an early adopter in a number of different areas, sports and otherwise, has been historically to U of H's benefit. I mean, let's say you fast forward 7 months and U of H wins some games at the event, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the money is a little funny, and maybe the things that were initially promised weren't entirely available. At the very least, you're playing in what would be an extremely good traditional MTE event, an extremely bolstering to your non-conference kind of event, and seeing what your team, with largely the same faces, but at least, one new piece, and whoever is really taking Jamal Shedd's reps early in the season, you're going to be more tested as a basketball team as a result of it. If that's the only thing you get from this, I still think it's a net positive for the Cougs.
Absolutely. I think one thing that's going to be really interesting is, in terms of, you can say, okay, or we feel a little bit weird about UAE money backing us or whatever, but regardless of where the money's coming from, I'm just kind of intrigued as a college basketball fan, if it's going to kind of take, if 3 years from now, they're going to be like, yeah, this is turning into a successful, financially beneficial thing that we want to keep doing, versus like, oh no, we spent way more money on this than we have any chance of recouping. I mean, you saw in the CBS article, if you read it, you saw some kind of industry insiders going, man, I don't know, like the most successful MTEs make like $1 million or $2 million. How are they going to be paying $1 million to next year to 16 different teams as NIL collectives, and plus some money to the winners, plus put this thing on? And you're going to bet all on that, on assuming that people want to watch college basketball in November, which is traditionally college football season, and not when, again, you and me obviously always have the Maui Invitational on, or whatever.
Outliers, but yeah, we're outliers.
I don't think we represent the median TV consumer or entertainment consumer or even sports fan. So just in that aspect as well, I'm just kind of intrigued if this is going to be a thing where, if putting it on Netflix or wherever it's going to be, if Netflix or whoever is going to give them enough money to justify the money that they're paying out, and if that happens, if a streaming platform gives them enough money to make it work, then that means that platform is betting on a whole lot of people using their platform to watch this event, to watch college basketball in November. So hope it works. I don't love the fact that if it works, it kind of means, maybe more Gulf oil money trying to find, and venture capital money trying to find its way into college sports. I feel a little bit weird about that. But in the even if this, it sounds like they kind of have at least a plan to put on 3 of them. If this means $3 million over the next 3 years, and U of H plays a bunch of good teams in non-conference in Vegas over the next 3 years, and then the whole thing just kind of goes belly up and ceases to exist, oh well, Houston's, like I said, as long as the check's clear, as long as you get to play those games against elite competition with all the kind of the sports eyeballs on you, hey, it doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of risk on University of Houston side.
You're saying the bow for Atlantis presented by the Saudi Permanent Investment Fund doesn't give you the warm and fuzzies?
No, it doesn't feel the best, but that's the world we're living in. You might as well try to take all the opportunities that are afforded to you.
Agreed. Speaking of big offseason topics, last weekend into this current week, we saw the counterpoint to kind of the mini player exodus that we saw immediately after Cougar football spring practice, and the program added a number of transfers to the coming season's roster. A fairly lengthy list, Dustin. I believe it was 7. They officially announced today on Wednesday. It was all said and done. So you can kind of get this started. Who really stood out to you from this group? Who's the really intriguing player? Could be big picture, little picture that will be joining the Cougars for the coming season.
Yeah, I think there's a couple guys here that are pretty interesting. Definitely some added depth that was needed after the exodus, like you mentioned. One guy that I'm real intrigued by that doesn't have a lot of playing experience yet is Christian Brathwaite, a linebacker from LSU. Played 5 games as a true freshman for them last year. One of them was the bowl game, so he preserved his red shirt. So he actually comes to Houston with 4 years of eligibility. So, we'll see how ready he is as just second year out of high school. But, the Bayou Bengals liked him enough to put him on the field as many times as they could while keeping his red shirt. And Houston is supposed to be switching to a 3-4 base defense this year. By my count, only had 6 scholarship linebackers before Brathwaite. So I think good to add depth there. And I think that's a position where I suspect we'll see another linebacker or two still coming in at some point.
And not surprising that he didn't start every game as a true freshman for an SEC program, but I think it does mean something that staff wanted to see him the absolute maximum allowable number of games while still keeping his red shirt. I'm not saying I know exactly why he left, but LSU did make a defensive coordinator change and a position coach changes, so have to imagine that played at least some part in his decision to go to the portal. Kind of sticking with the same group, though, I think this guy plays a different kind of linebacker, Dustin. I wanted to highlight Gabe Peterson, who comes from New Mexico State, played his last 2 seasons for the Aggies of New Mexico, originally from Overland Park, Kansas, which is one of the bigger KC suburbs. Played in 27 of the possible 28 games he could have played in these past 2 seasons, which was by a wide margin these past 2 seasons, the best 2-year run in New Mexico State's football history under now departed coach Jerry Kill. This past season, Peterson was 6th in the Aggies in total tackles, led the team in QB hurries, was 2nd on the team in tackles for loss. I feel like I know he's going to be making a step up from Conference USA competition to what he'd be seeing on a week in, week out basis in the Big 12, but you don't really have a guy on the roster right now where you think, hey, this guy is maybe one of your pass rushers to build around. And not saying Peterson will be week 1, game 1, immediately ready to fill the role of a Nelson Caesar, who was quite good there, one of the best pass rushers in the Big 12 last year, but he's a promising guy that he was able to get on the field as much as he was for, typically here in New Mexico State, it's just like New Mexico State has been kind of synonymous with being one of the worst Division I programs, but they were absolutely not that these past 2 seasons. And I think a guy who really fits the profile is someone ready to make a step up from a CUSA program to a Big 12, a guy who is clearly outperforming his high school projection that I think could end up developing into a nice pass rusher when it's all said and done with this team.
Yeah, another guy I think interesting on the other defensive side of the ball coming up from a lower level is Carlos Allen Jr., who was a defensive tackle from Kennesaw State. Had been performing at a high level at the FCS level with them, and really had a number of offers from Kansas State, some other power conferences.
Indiana, I think I saw too.
Yeah, had offered him. So I think a lot of people interested in his services, and I think that's a really big addition for Houston to shore up another position, interior defensive line that had, where depth had kind of been looking like an issue, I think, coming out of spring ball. But adding him, someone who looks probably, ready to play right away, as I believe he's a junior, but adding him to Tulsa transfer Everett Rogers, and then returning youngster Anthony Holmes Jr., who was really, really intriguing as a I believe 2nd or 3rd year freshman this past year. I think that gives me 3 guys that I actually feel pretty comfortable interior of the D line. So excited about adding Allen to that group and having more depth at a position where you're going to need some depth over the course of the year.
I would also add Justin Benton to that group, even though I'd probably slot him behind all the guys you'd already mentioned there. Someone the last staff to go long look at, and who had originally went in the portal, but was convinced to come back and is still with the team. So yeah, and I think you lost a lot from interior D line from the departures. Shozi Nwankwo, Jamari Caldwell, Hakeem Ejijolaya more recently transferring out, but I'm not going to say, oh, well, you have for sure reloaded to exactly what you lost. I just don't think we know that at this point in the offseason yet, but certainly attacking that position group. And I think you're not, I don't think you're going to be hurting for depth on that side of the ball. I could also mention, even though he has less of a Division I body of work, another veteran guy, Jalen Satchel, who comes in from Old Dominion, played previously for Temple as well. Another guy would probably be in that rotation, the defensive line as well. I wanted to also mention a veteran trend, a guy who I expect, I think, to get on the field a fair amount, if not start. Could also be an interesting return guy. Brian Massey from SMU was another one of the guys to announce over the weekend. Played safety originally from the Houston area, prepped at Katy High. Actually, I remember this one. I remember because good friend and multi-time guest of the podcast, Jared of the Alamo Dome Audible, actually, right before he returned to kick, it was just like, oh yeah, that guy was a UTSA verbal for the longest time. And he immediately housed it against us. I was like, thanks, buddy. Way to jinx us there. Did not end up being the most notable return from that 2021 game, believe it or not. But I think what really stood out to me is Massey got on the field a bunch as a true freshman in 2020, had 105 tackles in his SMU career. Seemed like he had some injury problems the last couple seasons, was used less as a returner, kind of corresponding to that. But if he is healthy, he is going to be somebody who I think is a net positive in the return game. I mean, losing Matthew Golden, like, you're going to need somebody to be a difference maker in the return game. And I think he could also potentially start alongside probably AJ Halsey in the secondary. I think worst case scenario gives you depth in the defensive backfield and gives you a possible electric return guy. So I'm always excited to bring guys who are originally Houston area recruits back home as well.
Yeah, Massey and I mentioned Makai Muse, the wide receiver from Georgia, both come in
there too,
really strong return pedigrees. So really intrigued to see what Houston can do in the return game as well. Talk about defensive players, another safety coming over, another guy taking a step up all the way from Division II. Grand Valley State is
the Lakers.
Devin Pringle coming over as well. So definitely the staff looking to address some depth at the safety position there. And then offensively, really like a couple of wide receivers from Tulsa coming in, Devin Williams and Marquise Shoulders. Shoulders got hurt last year, but according to our Tulsa intel, looked pretty good. This kind of fan base there was pretty happy with him and excited with him when he was healthy. So I think those two significantly help shore up a position where, again, stay with me, Houston got hit pretty hard in terms of their depth in the portal there. So, but I think with, Manjack coming back, with Boogie Johnson coming back, really hoping for a breakout season from Jonah Wilson, super highly touted freshman who had that 160-yard touchdown catch while redshirting last year. Mentioned Muse from Georgia. Now these two guys, I think, actually gets your wide receiver room in a place where you're pretty happy with the depth that you got there. The terms of kind of FBS level proven guys that you have at that position. So I think that's another position where after some of the with those guys coming in, I feel a lot better about the depth than I did beforehand.
Yeah, the two Tulsa guys are kind of opposite body types. Shoulders is a smaller slot type receiver, will probably use the return game, something to kind of go to us talking about big, or at least like along with Muse and Massey could be an option there. Williams is a bigger target, listed 6'1". I think absolute worst case, those two guys give you depth at a receiver group that you said hit pretty hard by outgoing transfers. But I think now that we kind of see what this group could look like for 24, yeah, I feel pretty good about it, especially considering this might be a run first offense as well. You don't maybe necessarily need 4 or 5 guys to be massive high usage receivers for you. Gonna also mention, not that he has a huge body of work, but need bodies in this position group. Sam Seacrest, who was on the Louisville roster the last 2 years, will be joining the Cougars, originally from Indianapolis. Again, can't say much about his college career to this point, but I also don't think it's a red flag at this position group, offensive line. Like, you still don't see a lot of guys get on the field a ton their first 2 years at college, or oftentimes they got on the field their first 2 years because the program they were coming from was in pretty desperate straits, which I don't think really you could say is the case at Louisville. So not sure where he's going to be, but not ever going to be mad about getting another Division I body on the offensive line, Dustin.
No, for sure. Yeah, if the staff likes him and you got a guy with 3 years of eligibility left on the line, you'll take that, even if you kind of maybe hope he's not someone that you expect to see too much of the field this year.
I was gonna say, I'm scanning my notes here. I think think that's just about
yeah,
everyone. Yeah.
that's all 7 that were officially announced, and I think you hit a couple that have committed but have not officially been announced by the school. So I think if anything, we are a little bit ahead of the game here. Speaking of the transfer portal, while we're on that, I do want to mention women's basketball making a couple of additions this past week as well. Certainly the most notable one, Kateri Poole, really, really intriguing name. Was a 5-star recruit out of high school, played for Ohio State for a couple of years, transferred to LSU 2 years ago, was a key part of their national title run, was a rotation player most of the year, ended up starting all 6 games in the NCAA tournament as LSU won a national title. But then the bad news is she got dismissed from the team pretty early on into last season by the head coach over there in Baton Rouge. So, anytime you see a player that is, transferred and then got kicked off the team at the new school, I think that's, it may be right to be a little bit wary of that. And you just obviously want to make sure you got a player whose head is in the right place and who's wanting to, contribute on and off the court for the team. But, all you can do is really trust the coach's judgment on that one. So I think if she is ready to, if she does kind of have her head on right and is ready to be a team player and everything, then talent wise, I think it's an undeniable coup for Houston to get a player of that talent profile with that much experience to come play for them.
Yeah, you're talking about adding a player who's an above average defensive player, one who came from 2 different high level programs. Before the time at LSU, played in 45 games over 2 seasons at Ohio State, started 13 in that final season, was a 2021 Big Ten all freshman team selection as well, averaged over 6 points per game that freshman season. And like you said, played a notable role on the 2023 LSU team that won the whole thing. I think, again, there are some things that didn't necessarily go 100% right there, but when you're a program at U of H's level, I think you have to take the risk here. I mean, you have to trust the judgment here. It doesn't drastically change how I feel about the team's prospects next year, but I don't think you could also. I'm not going to let any misgivings I have about that just say, oh well, it's not a good ad because I don't like anything about the program. No, I mean, I would any year, I would jump to add the program or jump to add to the program a player of Poole's caliber. I think was what I was trying to say there. I mean, it was, as I say, it was something that actually was sort of newsworthy in the women's basketball space outside U of H. That's how big of an ad Poole is, even with some risk, like you said.
Yeah, the other addition I saw this last week was Summer Bostock, who was a reserve for Maryland last year, who I think kind of fits more of the profile of the rest of the handful of transfers we've seen coming into Houston this offseason, which is kind of bench player, rotation player for a power conference program.
Yeah, I was going to say enrolled early for 2 seasons ago for the spring semester of 2023, and then played kind of sparingly this past season, 10 games, 47 minutes total. So, like you said, kind of still a fairly unknown quantity at the Division I level, but also Maryland is a perennially good NCAA tournament team, so not an enormous indictment that Bostock didn't get on the floor and carve out a huge role in what was her first college season. Also represented Canada at the U16s level too, so was a fairly big player up in the Great White North there. So I think by my count now, Dustin, U of H has 10 or 11 players slated to return or committed to the program currently. So expecting we'll see a bit more activity in the portal still yet here in the offseason. We'll also say, I mean, if U of H can add, I don't know, kind of a front court post player equivalent to Poole, maybe someone who is a role player from a good program, but maybe looking to have a bigger role in the later stages of their college career. I'm not going to say it's going to completely change my tune with regard to this program, but I'll start to be even more intrigued. Like Poole's an intriguing ad, kind of like we talked about. I'll start to be maybe a bit more intrigued about what the coming season's roster looks like.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I want because again, we've spoken about our pessimism around the women's basketball program, but it's to be completely clear, we both really want to be proven wrong. We both really want this program to achieve things that we don't think it's capable of next year. And I think Poole could be a key piece to help you do that, but I'm kind of with you. I think I need to see at least 1 or 2 more players coming in this offseason where I go, oh yeah, this person looks like a ready to be a competent to high level Big 12 player before I'm really feeling like this team has the talent to get over the hump.
Agreed.
We will finish with a couple of teams that are in season. Well, I guess one actually is not in season because their Big 12 game just finished a little bit ago. So I think they're done. Should we go ahead and start with them? I guess since we just saw a teams have its season end. Sam, you want to
Yeah, might as well. Yeah, no, I'm good with that.
All right, we'll start with Cougar softball, who had a disappointing finish to a disappointing regular season. Got swept in 3 games up in Waco by Baylor, 6-0, 7-1, 6-0. I think maybe not shocking that Houston didn't win any games. I think maybe a little shocking they only scored 1 run. Like that's kind of the one thing we've at least had this year is say, well, at least this team knows how to score some runs. We weren't able to do that. With the losses to Baylor, finished the Big 12, their inaugural Big 12 campaign, 4-23. Pretty rough. Rough when you consider they beat the Longhorns in their first Big 12 game and they won 3 of their following 26 Big 12 games. Pretty rough, and that led them into the Big 12 conference tournament, which is a single elimination tournament. They were unsurprisingly the lowest seed, faced Kansas, the 7 seed, and lost 6-5. Actually, we're trailing big in this one and actually rallied. I didn't see the.
It was peek behind the curtain here. Dustin's internet went out about 18 minutes ago. So in that time that you were rejoining, I went over to the game tracker. Cougs had the bases loaded in 2 outs with Kennedy Thomas up, but unfortunately at 6-5, could not get anything else going and lost by that final score.
Yeah, rough. Got 3 runs. Yeah, 3 runs in the top of the 7th to cut it from 6-2 to 6-5, but then could not get an additional run in there to tie that one up and prolong their season. But I mean, I think regardless, it would have been nice to win, but if so, you're prolonging your season by 1 game. This is not a good team. This is not a dangerous team. This is not a team that was gonna do anything,
make a run,
make any kind of run in the Big 12 tournament. So gets us to the offseason. Our best understanding is that head coach Kyla Hollis's contract. Kristin Vesely. Kyla Hollis was the other softball coach before Kristin Vesely. I'm good. I'm awake. I'm here. I'm with you. Kristin Vesely, I believe, contract expires this offseason. So, she just went 4-23 in Big 12 play. So I think that is a pretty strong indication to Chris Pesman on what needs to happen here and whether or not there needs to be a second job opening for a spring sport for University of Houston.
Yeah, I don't want to be glib about calling for someone to lose their job, but if you go 4-23 in conference play in your final contract year, I don't know what would prompt a contract extension. I don't know what would prompt decision makers to say we need to see a longer look with the current leadership. Couldn't understand why that would be the case. Wouldn't be the first time that U of H's athletic leadership made a baffling decision to keep a coach around longer than they needed to, but I'm with you. I don't think that's the most likely or what we will ultimately find in the next week or so.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be the first baffling decision. It might be the most baffling.
It would be it would certainly be the most.
It would be way up there. Just again, never feels good to be like so and so should get fired, but you're in a results business, and 4-23 are not good results.
Yeah, and acknowledge if that's the way U of H goes, there are probably things outside of just the specific leadership that U of H would need to improve to get back to where they were previously in softball. This program was previously in softball, but also you can't just use that as a blanket excuse to keep around underperforming leadership. Just can't. Sorry.
Yeah, disappointing. And Houston hit 296 as a team this year. They hit 296, they hit nearly 300 as a team, and that's how bad the pitching was. So we did see Taria Coleman named second team All Big 12. Yeah. Very excited for her. And who was got the freshman? It wasn't
Bethany Aguilar. Bethany Aguilar was on the Big 12 All Freshman team as well.
Yeah, I thought maybe it would be Michaela Nita instead of her, but either way. Some really strong offensive performances. Which a lot of hitters hit really well, but time to bring in a different coach and see if we can finally at long last find some decent softball arms to come in and try to provide this program with a little bit of balance.
Yeah, it's been you've had decent
Speaking of some
pitchers
struggling bat and ball baseball, continued their disappointing season with another disappointing weekend, hosting UCF. Only got 2 games in, with the Sunday game getting rained out. Lost both of those 2 games, 4-1 and 6-4. Continue their just downward spiral in the Big 12. 6-17 at this point, with still, I guess, a couple of weekends to go. Although, why are there still a couple of weekends to go? I don't know, but yeah, this is continue to be another weekend where even at home, even against UCF, a team that kind of came over from the American Athletic Conference with you, and again, not getting blown out. Just maybe been the most frustrating thing about this Cougar baseball season is they haven't been just consistently getting blown out, but they have been consistently losing Big 12 games, unfortunately, and this was more of that this past weekend.
Dustin, 2 months ago, I sat in your living room and we watched U of H put the finishing touches on a sweep of Baylor to go to that point, very young Big 12 season, but to go 3-0 in Big 12 play. And that was 2 months ago, but it feels like a lifetime ago. You were 3-17 in conference play since you closed out that Sunday win over Baylor. And like you said, I there have been some blowouts in there. I mean, it's just baseball that'll happen even when you're having a decent season. But like the majority of them have been games where U of H, you could say maybe you're 1 or 2 hits or maybe 1 or 2 more clean innings away from potentially winning. But I mean, you are what your record is. You were 6-17. And I don't know if a weekend result, Dustin, is maybe matter in the current season that going 0-2 against UCF. They're not a bad team. Like UCF was 31st in the country in the RPI when I did my notes this week. By all accounts, a better team in the current season than the Cougs have been. And maybe that's what makes me the most mad, because UCF about 11 months ago looked at their baseball program in their final season in the AAC, and mind blower here, Dustin, they decided to make a change. They hired a well-regarded assistant and program alum in Rich Wallace, and wouldn't you know it, they have a team that actually might make the NCAA tournament. And that's not me saying that U of H would have cured 100% of their baseball woes if the school had elected not to renew Todd Whitting's contract last summer. There's no way of knowing that with any kind of certainty. But it's galling. It's galling, Dustin, to see the other 2 former AAC programs, 2 programs, mind you, with much less baseball history than U of H, have those 2 teams have noticeably better first seasons in the Big 12 than the Cougars are having right now. And we're 20 plus games into Big 12 play, and both of those teams have at least 5 more wins than the Cougars right now. Even the other newcomer that's languishing in the basement with you, BYU, has a head-to-head series win against the Cougars. And the only justification you really see for Whitting continuing on here at U of H these days is that he's an incredible fundraiser, but which, by the way, is not an assertion I dispute in any way. But God, it has to be about the wins and losses at some point, Dustin. And I think that's the $64,000 question. Why haven't these definitely improved facilities and good fundraising translate into Big 12 wins, or a team that is even remotely close to postseason at large caliber? Because it hasn't been the case in 5 years. Like, Dustin, 5 years ago, you remember your 5 years feels like a long time ago, because it was. That's the last time U of H even had an at-large caliber team, much less a team that actually made the tournament. You have to go 6 years to that one. I'm gonna tell a story that I've told on here before. You'll remember this. You were very much a part of this. In 2017, the 2 of us were groomsmen at a wedding of 2 very good friends of ours, and up in Lake Conroe, the same weekend as the regional round of the NCAA baseball tournament, which the Cougars were hosting. A great wedding for a couple who are still together. They have produced, I believe, Dustin, the greater Houston area's biggest U of H men's basketball fan under the age of 7. So that's cool. And it was a great wedding. And I was able to make it out for the final 2 U of H games of the 2017 regional that year. It was a dramatic win over Iowa and ultimately a dramatic loss to A&M to end the season. And I remember at the time, Dustin, thinking, really wish in the abstract I could have been there for the whole weekend, but I'll get another chance to, see this team in a regional, whether here or somewhere near here. And since then, 7 baseball seasons since then, U of H has not hosted a regional and has only made 1 appearance the year after since then. It's not good. And I genuinely can't tell you the last time I watched a U of H baseball game and it wasn't out of obligation to this podcast to inform my baseball coverage on this podcast, not just like an organic, like, hey, I love college baseball, because you and I fucking love college baseball. You and I's college baseball fandom predates our U of H fandom. That's how long you and I have been college baseball fans specifically. And I'm just crying. And I'm not like, I don't feel entitled. Oh, why isn't U of H competing for a Big 12 title? I am crying out for a team that is just 500 in Big 12 play right now. That is just has an RPI that I could squint at and be like, maybe with a good finish this season, we could even be like in bubble consideration. We're not even going to fucking make the Big 12 tournament, Dustin. We could go 6-0 over these final two series, which this team absolutely will not do, because Kansas and Oklahoma State are too good of opponents to go 6-0 against. And that 12-17 record will probably not be good enough to even make the Big 12 tournament. That's where we are, man.
Not good. No, it is rough. I mean, the two schools that most of my high school classmates went to were Cal State Fullerton and UC Irvine. I'm a college baseball fan. The first U of H game of any variety that I attended while still living out in California, having been accepted to U of H, not had yet attended classes there, went to see them play USD. Love college baseball. Very, very frustrating to see this team perform at this level. And it is, it's frustrating, like you mentioned, just because Tyler Whitting's contract was up this offseason. Like you had the chance to make the buyout free change in leadership. And now, I mean, you're almost certainly going to get another year of him, just because I can't imagine that Chris Pesman is going to be wanting to buy out 2 years of contract for the baseball coach. You might get 2 more years of them, because we'll see how bad he gets next year and how desperate Pesman is to save some face with the baseball program or not. But I mean, it's rough. It's rough that, you can't hardly remember when this team was a regional team. It's rough that last offseason, it seemed unlikely that they were going to break the streak or make major progress this year, and it's frustrating that this season is gone. And I mean, you can say, I think Houston's had some bad luck to some extent in Big 12 play. You outscored BYU over the weekend, lost 2 out of 3. You outscored the Longhorns over the weekend, lost 2 out of 3. You played Cincinnati, you scored the same number of runs as Cincinnati over the weekend, you lost 2 out of 3. Maybe a little bit of that is just bad luck and things. The hits just kind of all clumping together instead of spreading out nicely over the weekend the way that you like them to. But yeah, your RPI is what it is. Your record is what it is. Houston is not a couple of balls falling here and there, getting a little bit more luck here and there away from this being a regional team. And whether this is an American Athletic Conference program or whether this is a Big 12 program, the expectation around this program is to make a regional at least more often than not. And this is a program that hasn't done it since pre-COVID, and
pre-COVID by a couple of years.
Yeah, and just not in contention this year. It would be a shocker to see them in contention next year. It's fucking depressing watching the baseball program just spin its wheels and just be bad the way that it has been.
I wish I had some way to like dig us out and have a cheer ending to that, but I mean, hey,
that's
where we are.
Football offseason portal has been exciting. Well, I'm sure we'll see some more additions.
Dana Holgorsen is not the football head coach. Reason to be optimistic. Kelvin Sampson is still the men's basketball coach. Reason to be optimistic. There you go. That's your palate cleanser to end this one on. Those of you who have listened an hour-ish in.
You already get the fun of the tennis coaching search, and you're probably going to get another coaching search too coming up here in a few days with the softball program, I would imagine. So fingers crossed. But anyway, on that note, we'll go ahead and end it. As always, want to encourage you, if you do enjoy the Scott and Holman podcast on a regular basis, you can support us in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/shpodcast, sign up to make a $5 or greater recurring monthly donation to Sam and myself. And or Bobby, whichever of us, however we're splitting that up, I'm not even sure. You can you can support us for absolutely free by leaving us a 5-star review in your podcast app of choice. If you want to say hi, you can email us shpodcast@gmail.com, tweet us @shpodcast, or blue sky us at podcast.bsky.social. That's it for us. If you made it all the way to the end, you are absolutely awesome. And as always,
go Cougs.